Neurotic founders lose money. They lose tendentially $90,000 on a fundraiser, on their first fundraising round. While on the other hand, conscientious founder, so precise founder and really organized founder, make more money in the fundraising stage, but at the same time have a harder time in exiting. All right, welcome to a special episode of the Week in Italian Startup. Today with Niccolò, we're gonna dive into one of the controversial paper that recently was spurred a little bit of attention, which is Founder Personality Entrepreneurial Outcomes, Large-Scale Field Study of Technology Startup, from two researchers from Columbia Business School, Brandon Freiberg and Sandra Matz. So, interesting paper, a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. So essentially, what they're trying to accomplish is really to relate what is considered some of the most advanced study and model for personality, which is the 5 big personality traits, which has a lot of validation in the psychological industry, that to essentially what are startup outcomes. So they take specific outcomes in the startup industry and they try to match and see how exactly founder personality traits can actually have an impact on what are considered some of the milestones of the startup ecosystem for a founder. So Niccolò, what's your hot take on this one first?
Let me start from first principles. So you very often hear in ventures people saying whether to invest in the jockey or in the horse. But then the key question is, how do you assess the jockey, whether he is the number one or number two? So the evaluation of the A teams, where does that come from? And there's been a lot of research, and I have to say, in recent times, there's been a lot of discussion around founders' personalities in several ways. There was this newsletter by Andrew Retter from Early Bird about data-driven VC, who basically made it clear to the world that this paper was wrong. So I think there's a lot to say, and it is very interesting to deep dive and see what the research tells us about founders' personalities.
Yeah, let me just jump in with something a little bit shocking, which is neurotic founders lose money. They lose tendentially $90,000 on a fundraiser, on their first fundraising round. While on the other hand, conscientious founder, so precise founder and really organized founder, make more money in the fundraising stage, but at the same time have a harder time in exiting. So, very bold, very interesting statement. I'm kind of trying to provoke some thoughts here. But these are some of the two, make findings that we can find. So that's pretty interesting and pretty direct. Let's start from the end. Let's start from the conclusion, I would say, Nick, so we can really jump in and then maybe retrace back our steps to what is the big personality model and the 5 big personality model, and then the startup outcomes. So basically, the study gives us essentially, I would say, three big, really big ideas at the end, which is, the most obvious one is, obvious, at least the most confirmed one is that neuroticism is bad overall. So neurotic founders, which, essentially are people that, neuroticism is defined as people that have a hard time dealing with emotions. So that's bad overall in all stages of the founder's life and in the startup life. So that's a kind of hot take number one, which can dive into later on. Secondly, I would say openness and agreeableness. They have a positive correlation with the idea of raising the first amount of fundraise. So openness, again, it's something extremely positive. So definitely there is a high correlation there, or at least statistically interesting. And the third, conscientiousness, which essentially is the tendency of people to be detail-oriented and organized, is ambivalent. It has a positive correlation to the first raise, But then during the exit phase, that can become quickly a problem. So these are the three main ideas that we can really distill from this paper. Let's maybe break really quick. On one side, the Big Five personality trait model, and on the other side, what the author take as startup outcomes, just for the people that want to have an overview. So essentially, the Big Five personality trait is a model which is pretty old. It was developed back in the 50s, used during Second World War to actually assess U.S. Navy generals. And it's been developed in the past years also by extending its reach and being validated also through data. So that's a very powerful model. It's been applied for marriage counseling, predicting divorce, predicting educational level, school performance. So really solid model. So essentially what we see is the five main traits are in order: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So just to give a quick rundown, openness is just, the trait of people being extremely open to new experiences and valuing new experiences. Conscientiousness is the idea of people being extremely detail-oriented and precise, very organized. Extroversion is the social one, essentially just being outgoing, compared to the opposite, which is being extremely closed and socially awkward. Agreeableness is the idea of being extremely empathic. And finally, neuroticism, which is essentially the idea of being very having a hard time dealing with emotion and understanding how exactly to handle emotional upside or downside. So that's the idea.
The opposite of neuroticism is emotional stability. That to me makes it clear what it is.
So on the other hand, there are like a few startup outcomes that the authors are taking as what is considered some of the milestone for a startup founder. So first of all, the ability of raising fund, which is a yes and no statement. So that data set will tell us whether founders are able or not to raise money. The second is the amount raised in the first round. The third outcome is the amount of investors involved in the first round, and then finally the ability to exit, and the fact that the startup have exited, generally through an IPO or an acquisition. So basically we are taking both routes here. And generally what is interesting is that this exit sort of capacity is measured between 8 to 10 years span. So this is like a really quick sort of startup-like exit, which kind of reflect what is happening in the venture space when, investment period are roughly 10 years and venture capitalists need a quick exit. Let's quickly maybe talk about the methodology, I would say. I think that's an interesting one. I don't know if you, Nick, want to take the lead on this really quick, and then I can help you jump in.
Well, the basic idea of the methodology is quite interesting in terms of approach. I mean, the problem is how do you find enough data about founder's personality at scale in order to run this type of study? You can't go out and just make the test to 2,000 of entrepreneurs. They are busy. So the approach that the authors took was to basically take all the tweets of thousands of founders 2 years before starting their startup, collecting 12 million tweets, 170 million words, on average 16,000 words per founder, so quite a considerable amount of data, and then applying some machine learning to the data to infer and measure the founder personality traits, so try to build the personalities as implied by what they write and how they write it. There were 10,000 founders startup pairs in the study. Each founder taken as a singular, not as a team of founders. So each founder was evaluated as a singular person related to the startup. And as you said, what was controlled, what was measured was the actual, if they actually raised funding, how much they raised in the first round, number of investors in the first round, and finally, whether there was an exit via IPO or acquisition. So it's quite an interesting approach to running this type of test.
Yeah, I think there are like 2 points which are particularly interesting, which is this study is the first one that measures such variables in such a big sample size. So there has been studies done relating personality traits with entrepreneurs, but usually it was never done on such a big sample. So that's definitely like a very valuable point for this one. And the second one is the use of course, machine learning and predictive model to try to predict instead of only relying on self-reported assessment that have been doing and that have been like used in the past. So very interesting using the latest of the natural processing languages technology. If we check, for example, with the kind of techniques being used, it's definitely state of the art, starting from the idea of word embedding and infercent, which is basically has been developed by Facebook to represent words in terms of vectors, and that really is the basis for any machine learning model. Second one is using regression, like some of the advanced one, like ridge regression, which is mentioned in the paper. So definitely one of the best tool to make a predictive model work. So that's very, very interesting. All right, and the idea of using also like a huge database from Twitter, also this has like scientific support. So there's been previous studies telling how tweets and social media presence can actually be a good way to predict personality traits. So that's not the only study out there saying that. So there is like scientific basis for that.
Can I get one tiny bit around the starting point, the machine learning model they applied to actually analyze the tweets? So they trained the model on the My Personality data. That was a project run on Facebook where people people on Facebook self-applied to run the personality test, and the owners of the app collected a lot of information about, a great distribution of people. And this data from 47,000 users, that's kind of sizable sample. And this data was the starting point because it is tagged, so the outcome. This was the starting point to build the model used to analyze the tweets of the founders. This is interesting, very interesting.
So let's start maybe taking a look to the so basically the basic fundings depending that we were mentioning at the beginning. So let's start from the first idea, which is, well, the basic one is that, okay, there is a strong base that founder personality is in fact associated with startup success of some sort when measured. So there is definitely like a relevance to the idea of using personality as a main characters when it comes to assessing founders. So that's kind of the overarching idea. Let's talk about openness and agreeableness. So again, basically empathy, being open to new experiences, being open to new situations, that's positively linked to raising an initial round of funding. So if reader will check out figure 2 in the paper, then you can actually see like some statistical significance where agreeableness and openness are some of the leading indicator, especially for the first round, for raising like a first round. What is your take on this one, Nick?
Well, so the key point is that once you read this paper, some things shall not surprise you. So this is not surprising me at all. It's a relationship business, right? So it is interesting not surprising in a sense, to see that if the fundus is open and agreeable, this is positively correlated to actually raising the first round. If you think about it, in the first round, you don't have much other stuff than you and the presentation, and maybe product, or but a bit. So I'm not super surprised. Let's say this of this specific result. What do you
Yeah, I
think?
agree. It's confirmatory. It's confirmatory, but
Confirmatory.
yeah, the practice really tell us the same thing. I mean, of course, openness definitely relates to the fact of looking for investor, as simple as that, or like trying something new in terms of product or strategy. And yeah, we see it every time. Actually, there is like a investment in new founders, and that's definitely like an interesting trait to keep an eye on. So yeah, I agree with you. I agree. That's confirmatory, not shocking, but at least there is data backed. So that's probably
Yeah.
most of the value here. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to neuroticism. I think that's an interesting one. Well, also there is some surprising elements and unsurprising elements, I feel. So basically, again, neuroticism is the inability to actually handle emotions and emotional roller coaster. That actually, running a startup basically is an emotional roller coaster. And that's really negative, especially negatively correlated with three specific outcomes, which are the amount of funding raised in the first round. So there is a significant negative correlation there. The number of investors involved in the first round, that's also negative correlation. And finally, a very strong, less likelihood of exiting. So all over the place, neuroticism is definitely like something to look out for, essentially. So on the opposite side, that's okay, not too surprising, but confirmed, and it's real. It's definitely real. Neuroticism is weird because actually there are interesting elements there which are at the same time curious, which is maybe neurotic can be borderline to obsessed with details, but investors might take it as less competency on certain points. I can see already here creeping in a few elements that might actually overlap. So again, the big five, maybe one of the limitations of the big five model is the fact that boundaries are not as sharply defined as one might think. So there are elements that actually might interact in an unexpected way. So neuroticism might be one of the traits that can actually suffer from this element. So just a quick thought out there. Another element, I would say that low resilience, definitely. Neuroticism is related with resilience. No traits specifically talks about resilience in founder and the ability to actually get over past problem and overcome a certain situation. So there is no control for that. But there is sort of the negative, which is neuroticism in a way. So across the border, again, that's definitely something to consider. So low resilience is across the border something which is negatively has an impact. So maybe let's already tie some implication for investors here into the discussion, which is should investor beware of people which measure low in resilience and high in neuroticism? What do you think? Is this something that it's essential and is a deal breaker?
Well, I mean, this is a harder question than it seems, right? Data might look like it is suggesting to answer yes. So it is true that you should be aware of that. And so the answer will be probably yes. And as you said, resilience is a strong indicator, and maybe high levels of neuroticism means that the time spent going out looking for funding and staying on track on your project, on your idea is shorter. That means less exposure to investors, so less ability to raise and to actually launch a startup. And that's, in any way you see it, that's a problem for an investor.
I agree. That's
Right?
that's a major
So
point.
even if it's previous, but if you project into the future and you expect instability going forward, that might be a huge problem.
Interesting.
Or an investor will perceive it as a huge problem, and then you drop the opportunity.
Do you have in your experience a one time where this kind of intuition about the inability of the founder to handle hard situation become a deal breaker on maybe certain deals that you have been working on?
Well, let me take a step back because there are two ways to answer this question. One is if you strictly measure, there's indicators, and the other is um, if you have more or less not a standard quantitative way to measure these indicators, but you imply them from, for example, the diligence process. We currently do not measure any personality traits, but we do have a diligence process where we tend to observe some behaviors from the founders. And even if I don't have the horror story of that specific time when, and if I had, that would be relevant. I would say that there were a few occasions when the feeling was that the founder was not consistent, was they did not transfer not security, but self-confidence about what they were saying, where they were going. And when you feel this, that the conversation is like not linear, then you think, okay, so there's something wrong here, and then you drop the opportunity because you don't feel right in that conversation. So no specific whole story, but a few occasions when the feeling was not right, and it was related also to this inconsistency in the story, in the behavior, in the feeling that the founder gave us.
Interesting. Yeah, on my side, we definitely
So
dropped some deal. Yeah, we definitely dropped some deals out of feelings and intuition about the inability of people to actually handle high stressful situations. So
yeah.
we have some more stories here. All right, let's move on to conscientiousness. So here's, we can talk about the paradox of conscientiousness in a certain way. So again, just to recap the results, the idea here, okay, first of all, conscientiousness is the propensity of people to actually be detail-oriented and precise and orderly. So that's what is being measured. And we have two conflicting parts of the story, which is people measuring high in conscientiousness have a significant high likelihood to raise capital, especially in the first round. So that's like a very positive result. On the other hand, we have people with high conscientiousness related with a higher likelihood, a statistically significant higher likelihood to exit their company. So what was your first reaction to this conflicting element?
That is very interesting. I think this is to me, this is the most interesting result of the research, and one big lesson not to aim for the extreme in any specific measure. It somewhat says that you need some more conscientious, but not too much as an investor. Even though one thing it is not clear to me, Jack, and help me out here. Um, because from the others, the implication of high level of too much high level of conscientiousness is about having a grander vision, a grander mission about what you're doing, and you don't want. So you have a grand plan and you're executing on it, and you don't want to stop it. So um, my observation, and help me out, is the time span of the research long enough to actually measure the outcome of the very highly conscientious founders in terms of results and return to the investors? So there is probably a missing element of having a long enough time span from the point of view of the company, even though from the point of view of the investor, probably I understand the problem, because if my fund can only be active for 10 years, and a very high level of a very high consensus founder will have a 30 years plan, that will not be compatible with my fund. So this is a mixed type of information. So I mean, I'm curious about whether in the longer term there will be different results here. I don't know whether you had the same
Yeah,
the same
definitely,
reading.
definitely interesting. Paradoxical. Well, I think the first part doesn't surprise me too much, which is conscientiousness relating positively to the likelihood of fundraising in the first part. Actually, strong of the fact that there are also studies which were mentioned in the paper that relate high business planning skills related to venture growth. So there is a study there out there, like basically relating these elements. So attention to detail, making a great business plan, all these things that we see like on a daily basis, they actually work, they play, they have a role. So yes, conscientiousness definitely has a space and an important space in the sort of first raise of a company, for sure. When it comes to the second part, which is, do we have like a long enough span? I agree, because so the negative correlation really refers to a relatively short time frame, and that's where I want to maybe pull in an investor bias here. So they're taking the outlook of the investor, of the VC. So it looks like at this point, they're really wearing like the hat of the VC, which is, a fund, typical life is 10 years. Companies need to take an exit within that time frame. That's the only time. So the time frame is squeezed, is a little bit squeezed. So the negative correlation might actually be derived from this squeezing of a time frame.
Yeah, I would argue that's, I mean, that's a key point somewhat in the study. If you think about the time frame to get to the IPO, for example, study from the first rounds, I mean, the very fast companies take more than 10 years. So Snowflake took like 12 years, almost 10, 11 years. So it's not easy probably to actually get a grip of this actual correlation between conscientiousness and results from the point of view of the founder. I was trying to look for the time. I was looking for the time frame here in the study, but I believe since the beginning of time of Twitter. So I mean, the time frame is large enough.
Part of the argument mentioned in the paper is the fact that a conscientious founder has a harder time to let go, in the sense that if venture capitalists really need to liquidate the position as quickly as possible, conscientious founder, they tend to stick with the mission, and they want to really bring this company, their company, as quickly and as forward as possible, which in their study looks like it has a negative connotation. I don't think it's necessarily so.
I agree with you. Just out of curiosity about the time span. The time span. Even though this is absolutely true if you take the point of view of the company. If we take the point of view of the investor, and you perceive that a conscientious founder will, try to completely deploy his vision, and if it takes 20 years to deploy his vision, it is not good. What do we see? So you will not have probably the exit that you would like to have with an IPO or some kind of very high value sale. You maybe will be able to monetize through a secondary sale. You will be happy, but not super happy. Uh, so I would really like to see more research regarding this specific type of outcome.
When it comes to conscientiousness, actually, I kind of feel the positive part of it, even if of the negative correlation due to the time, in the sense that, mission driven founders that want really to want to bring their company to the end. That's a positive trait from an investor perspective. I think that's one of the major actually positive traits. So I'm debated whether conscientiousness really has this ambivalence, really has, is really like that. So yeah.
We can debate about it. I mean, again, it depends, I believe, from the point of view that you take. From the point of view of the company, of the market, if you have a founder that's, going all in on a grander vision of a great mission, uh, let's say in the purest form of venture capital, there's a new technology that will improve everybody's lives. I'm absolutely with you. But if I take the position of the VC investor, which has a 10 years fund, and this grand vision requires 20 years to be deployed, I mean, I'm in big trouble. I will not be able to actually fully materialize or fully capture the value created by this founder. So in a sense, I was right, but it's not enough right. So I got the right jockey, probably the right horse, but in the wrong race. So, that's that's interesting. I mean, in a sense, right?
Very
Uh,
interesting. Yeah.
so I agree with you, but up to a point. Up to a point. You can be right in so many aspects, and then wrong in one that you wouldn't you would have not wanted it to be wrong. So that's
Interesting.
the game, right?
Absolutely. So let's talk about maybe a few other limitations of the paper and where maybe there is some work to be done. So first of all, this is a US-based sample, which of course it kind of limits a little bit the scope of the sample. And secondly, the fact that what about founders that don't have a strong social media presence on Twitter? So how do we account for those? So that's another element that I see that is a little bit limiting. Yeah. But I think the strongest point, in my view, is the problem that they actually mention at the very beginning of the paper, which is the endogeneity problem, which is essentially how founders might actually switch and change their personality a little bit over the course of the startup. So how do you account for people working on themselves, becoming more organized, more less neurotic, and how that has an impact? So that's powerful, because part of the life of the founder is really sharpening yourself in becoming like a better entrepreneur. So personality traits, well, there are arguments according to which you cannot change those. I don't know. I'm not too sure about this.
That's an interesting point. Pattern dependency. It's very difficult to measure it. I mean, they can only look at it from the ends, but still, that's an important one. This is, I think, another important point. I mean, if you're taking a look at the results of the paper from the point of view of who the founders are, but there are people when you measure money invested and who's investing and how many people are investing. I mean, there are people on the other side too. So the relevance of the results is related to, I mean, in the current market, how other people make decisions. So is that optimal? I don't know whether, is that the best possible outcome? What if we, I mean, we as investors optimize for founders that we like because they're open, they're agreeable, that look consistent, uh, because at the beginning it is, easier and better because it's, it makes us feel better to invest there. But on the other side, we are missing on huge potential because we take the wrong decisions because we select a specific type of personalities because we are people as well. So, I mean,
What is your top takeaway from this paper, Nick? Just to conclude our discussion.
nothing surprises me a lot in the paper, even though I think it will start to be important to start measuring some aspects of, for example, the personalities of the funds we invest in, just to have a better understanding of the way we decide and we choose. That would be the great starting point. And then to try to drive a better way of judging and selecting from our side. So I think the greatest lesson learned is we still deploy a lot of gut feeling that we do not try to quantify in some way. We as a team. So talking about our limitation, it would probably be important to start also looking in more detail into this part of the business. I mean, if the starting point is you invest in people, and the only thing that you don't measure are people, probably there is something wrong or missing, not wrong, missing.
I agree. So team due diligence, systematic and detailed team due diligence, that's probably like the other aspect, especially in early stage investment.
I just want to say that this is about Primo Digital. Primo Space does this type of analysis. So we are employing it as a firm. Just, we need to apply it full wide. That's interesting, though.
No, that's true. That's true. From my side, I think the big takeaway, I'm taking the founder perspective. What a founder can learn from this is the idea of awareness. Really, different stages needs different awareness, and adjusting and changing and kind of making things better for yourself. If you find yourself being extremely with a tendency of neuroticism, that's gonna be really bad and really hard. So instead of focusing energy on other stuff, that's probably one of the first things to do. I don't want to kind of end up as a psychological counseling kind of conclusion, but definitely like having and developing like a strong emotional awareness and personality awareness on yourself. It's not easy, but it's definitely like worth because of basically all the possible elements that can play in the future of the company. So I'm giving you more of a soft sort of conclusion, but that's what I really take from this paper.
I just wanted to add that remember that this study is about single founders, not teams. So, once you know the type of personality that you have, that might drive you into building the team with the right mix that will maximize all the opportunities that you are looking for, including raising the first round and growing the company. So again, this is a great lesson around building the right team.
Thank you so much, Nick, for joining. It was a great conversation, very interesting, and I'll see you next time.